it's a practice, and it's simplifying, Dan. I'll say during my seminars often that I think that when we say that we grow spiritual, it is actually kind of misleading. I think you actually shrink because it's all a matter of simplifying, and whether you call it growing spiritual or even if you take a more secular approach to it and just being period. I don't think that you grow it. You actually shrink it. You cut away the stuff that really doesn't serve you, starting with the worrying about things that don't even exist, the fear and insecurity of tomorrow, something you haven't even met, something that doesn't even exist yet, and fears of things, fear being just you anticipating something negative. And if you cut away with that and you refine and improve and you actually simplify your life, you realize how much power you actually have, because a lot of the insecurities are simply because you don't think you have much power. But as the labeler of events, you are actually the person who defines your life. Life is the definition you give to those events. When you simplify and you shrink in that sense, I think that's what they meant biblically when they said, you have to have the mind of a child to enter the kingdom of heaven. I don't think that they meant, go in your diaper and want a pacifier. I think what they meant was, here, this child isn't worried about yesterday. It's not worried about tomorrow. It's right now. This is it, and it's opening and it's seeing what is the ism, as you were saying.
Yes, and I completely agree with that. I joke with people and tell them that our business, Peaceful Warrior Services, we started small, then we downsized. And yes, I believe life is, because of what we've picked up that has, one sage said, the problems in life is not so much what we know, or what we don't know, but it's about what we do know that's not so. When I first started learning trampoline, before I became fairly good at that particular activity, I learned to do some things incorrectly. And as most of us have experienced, whether it's playing tennis or doing a sport, if you learn it incorrectly, you have to spend some time unlearning, which is much harder than learning it fresh.
And keeping in mind, everyone who's listening, when Dan Millman just said that he was pretty good, he was world champion.
Yeah, when I was
I figured I'd throw that in, Dan, since you left it out.
Thanks. Yeah, I did win that first world championship. But when I first learned, I learned it wrong, and I had bad habits. On somersaulting, I was leaning backwards and so on. And in fact, I went through the springs in an exhibition for my whole school. It was kind of embarrassing for a kid, at 14. But it took me quite a while to relearn it and learn it right. If I'd learned it correctly from the start, it would have been much easier. But most of us in growing up misunderstand certain things about reality. And so we're looking at life through a window, and that window is distorted. It has spots on it and dark spots and distortions. So we see the world through a filter of our own associations and beliefs and opinions that this means this and that means that. And so it complicates our lives. So when you talk about downsizing, simplifying, by cleaning that window, by starting to notice the distortions in the window through which we see the world and our perceptual filters, we start to intuit and one day perhaps grasp the essential simplicity of life arising, the beauty and simplicity. And those who've had some enlightenment experiences, say in the Zen tradition, through meditation, working with koans, and breaking through that mind we think we have, we begin to grasp it's all so simple. And many people laugh when they have those experiences. Everything becomes quite humorous, how we added all these things and not realized it to our lives, instead of just kind of breathing and accepting it like a young child, as you say, through the eyes of a child that hasn't yet developed what we call ego, and sees life as it is, the kind of psyche that, like children, when you're going for a walk with them, they like to stop and pick up a little stone that looks interesting to them. Wow, look at this. And we're saying, come on, we've got to go,
Right.
That's the kind of simplicity that we can develop and we can reanimate in our lives. And also, that's part of empowerment, too, because kids don't assume they can't do things. They're told, well, you can't do this, you can't do that.
Exactly. We teach, you're too small for that, you can't. They don't. They aren't told that. We limit them. We begin to throw stuff into their glass.
Right.
The same stuff we probably had in our glass.
Exactly.
But I'll tell a quick story when I was in the military when we get back. We're speaking with Dan Millman. He's a former world champion athlete, university coach, martial arts instructor, and college professor. He's the author of Way of the Peaceful Warrior, which is now available on DVDs wherever DVDs are sold. I just saw it this weekend. I think that it's a great movie. It's a great book, as well as the rest of Dan's books. You can find out more information about Dan, his event schedule, and his products at danmillman.com. You're listening to Empowered Living, Life, the Truth, and Being Free. We'll be right back. Welcome back. You're listening to Empowered Living, Life, the Truth, and Being Free. I'm your host, Steve Maraboli. For more information about our Better Today, our speeches, programs, and seminars, please visit bettertoday.com or stevemaraboli.com. We're speaking with Dan Millman. He is the author of The Way of Peaceful Warrior, fantastic book and now movie available starring Nick Nolte wherever movies are sold. You could visit Dan Millman's website at danmillman.com. Before we went to break, Dan, I want to tell you a quick story about the power of the mind. Actually, when I was a military policeman, and we went to a house and it was a domestic dispute. In this case, it was a child who was becoming violent and abusive towards the mother. The kid was only 7 years old. At the time, I was in fantastic shape. I've been doing martial arts my whole life as well. And I went, and the kid was acting really, well, the same size as a 7-year-old, and I kind of held on to him. This kid launches me across the room. I do it again. He launches me across the room again. We finally get him down, and of course, this becomes the running joke at my squadron. But while talking to the mother afterwards, the kid seemed fine. He just looked like he had anger issues to me. And she said, no, you know what, he's autistic. And I didn't know. I was 18 years old. I had no idea what that meant. And I said, so what does that mean? Is he on some sort of steroids? Because here, my ego, I know I just got launched across the room by a 7-year-old. Uh-huh. And then she says, no, you know what? He just hasn't been taught that 7-year-olds aren't that strong.
Yeah, exactly.
And that always stuck in my head. And before we went to the break, you mentioned that with kids, and it's so true. And as parents, if we could not pass on our own limiting beliefs and let your kids realize the power they have is amazing, absolutely amazing. It's the same power you have. But the power they have is amazing, and the power you have as a parent to keep them, they learn when they're young, I think I can. And somewhere along the lines, they get trained by social conditioning, as Deepak says, social conditioning, but it's like prison, but worse than prison. At least in prison, you can see the bars. If we could keep them out of those bars and keep them, and I keep plugging this movie, Dan, simply because I love the movie. And I really think that these are the type of movies that should be shown in schools, because the messages in here and stuff like the Peaceful Warrior book is something you should read. Of Mice and Men is a great book, but I really think that maybe they should be reading books like Way of the Peaceful Warrior. It's just so you can get the mindset, change the mindset. What we need in a society is a change of mindset and people realizing how much power they actually do have and how much they can simplify their lives, that a lot of the issues and the mess you think you're in, you're not really in. You have a lot more solutions than you think you do, but you're so busy looking at the mud and not the stars, as Dan said earlier, that you really can change. The change is there. And the good news is it can happen now.